It's not just people who are mean. You know how they say that heaven is a place filled with eternal peace and happiness? It's a load of shit. At least, it is now. All those high and mighty beings who go on and on about being so pure and moral is such crap. To me, heaven is nothing more than another version of hell, created just to have us live in endless ignorance. I'm no good with people. I've been repeatedly ridiculed for being different, inferior, odd. I've been called so many different names I've lost count. I tend to ignore it, pretend I'm not there, protect myself by escaping into my mind, where no one can hurt me. That's why I like reading. In a deeper corner of heaven lies a small library with just a couple of books. You would think heaven would have thousands of books with vast knowledge spanning eons and millennia. But that's not reserved for us. We're kept as sheep, innocent minds void of emotion and feelings, to continue this never-changing eternity. Still, I spend most of my time there, rereading the books and imagining myself anywhere but here. It almost helps for a bit, but then I have to snap back to reality, where I'm once again alone. There was one time I got curious. I secretly followed a higher angel to a place I had never seen before. I watched him walk up to a tall set of doors and enter. I waited a bit, unsure what to do, this knotted feeling forming in my gut as I pushed open the doors myself. The library I had been dreaming about lay in front of my eyes. The tallest shelves I'd ever seen, spanning as far as the eyes could see. As soon as I stepped forward, the smell of parchment and ink filled my senses. This rush I had never felt before came over me as I scanned the books lining the walls, running my fingers across the covers, each labeled with the name of a person I had never heard before. I couldn't control the urge to flip through the pages of the first book I saw. It was insane. Things I had never heard about or even fathomed laid on these pages. People I didn't know, living lives I could have only dreamed about. After that day, I frequently returned to the library. I spent most hours roaming the halls, reading the new books I had found. What surprised me the most was that it seemed almost desolate here. I never once encountered another soul apart from my first arrival. This, of course, made it easier to come and go at my discretion without being noticed. Did you know that there are so many vast things in this world? Well, let me correct myself. This place that we watch over, called Earth, is apparently so large, completely different from heaven too. They have sights and smells I've never experienced. It's a place where temperatures change year-round and people who adapt to these new environments with ease. They have different cultures and experience because, for them, things are ever-changing and their life is but a small, fleeting moment in the history of it all. Did you know there are people who can create their own stories too? They create a whole universe in just one tiny book. The library that we had access to couldn't even compare to the amount of stories that exist out there. And what's even crazier is that even when the people behind these books may have moved on, their thoughts and experiences are engraved within these stories to be passed on through an unknown number of generations that may follow. Though the books I had read from this library were a bit different from the ones I had read before. These carried the stories of people who had existed long ago and were completed before I even had the chance to reach them. After a bit of time, I found some were even more odd as well. Though seemingly the same as the others, after a certain point they were uncompleted. But as I watched, they slowly began to fill in as if the story was writing itself. It was fascinating. I could leave, and when I would return, the story would have had more added to it. With the knowledge that these stories I had access to were basically never-ending, I felt a strange feeling of contentedness, safety. I might have gotten too comfortable with my surroundings. It happened on a day I was reading one of those self-continuing stories. I was so engrossed in the plot that I didn't realize what was about to happen next. I got snapped back into reality the worst way possible. I got caught. Fear and pain pierced my body as I was dragged by my hair along the floor until we reached the exit. I couldn't tell you what happened after that. I was stripped of any honor I had left. They didn't banish me to hell, but for me, that would have been far better than the latter. The harassment not only increased, but was now happening right out in the open. It's no surprise, but no one ever took to my defense. I never had a moment of peace, and I wasn't even allowed to hide away in a bookend. I don't know what welled up in me after that. Anger, sadness, frustration. I tried to hold it in as long as I could, but at some point it started to overflow, and when it did, it was already too late. I had to go. I pushed past a group of angels who were ridiculing me. I rushed back to the library, barricading the door with as many books as I could carry. I ran as far down the halls as I could until the entrance was no longer in sight. Finally, far enough away, I fell to the floor, completely out of breath. After looking around, I found myself at what must have been the end of the library. Never having traveled this far, my fear quickly turned to curiosity, and after regaining my composure, I looked around the room. As I was looking around, the blank wall at the end of the hall opened up a passageway to another area. As I walked inside, the room was empty, with a couple pillars and a large clock-like drawing on the floor. In the center stood a small pedestal with a single quill pen resting on top. I took the quill from the pedestal and started to examine it. Then I felt something wrong. I threw the pen across the room, but it was already too late. I don't know what this feeling was, but it was excruciating. I instantly fell to my knees and held my head in my hands. Then it happened. It gushed out, flowing like a river trapped behind an old dam, flooding my thoughts and emotions. Hundreds of small cuts began to form over my body as if someone was stabbing me with the tip of that stupid quill pen. The cuts were leaking a black-like substance and was flowing smoothly down my body, sticking to my skin. The pain was so terrible. I hadn't even noticed the other angels had made their way past my weak barrier. As I screamed in pain, they just stood there in shock, frozen in fear. Not a single one reached out to help. The worst of all, my right eye changed. Now a bloody red iris and my sclera a pitch black, leaking the same thick substance and staining my once clean face. As my wings shed their feathers and horns pierced through my skull, the other angels just stopped and stared. The pain was immense, the feeling like no other. Lastly, a tail ripped out my back and formed neatly, placing itself on the ground behind me. A devil had emerged. After what felt like a millennia, noises started bouncing throughout the room. The angels standing behind me looking in disgust, words of contempt and small whispers were echoing from the crowd. I tried to wipe what once were tears, but it was no use. I broke down. My anger turned to sadness. What was I doing? Why did I let myself become so unhappy, so distant? How could people who were considered righteous and pure just stand and stare while I suffered right in front of their eyes? I took a breath, and as if I already knew what to do, I scrambled to the quill pen I had previously thrown across the room. Without hesitation, I plunged the quill into my hand. Scribbling on the floor in blood, I prayed to be anywhere but here. Soon, black smoke filled the air, enveloping the room. Then, everything went dark. When the smoke cleared, the angels left standing finally started to move. They looked around, but there was nothing. The fallen angel, the traitor, had vanished along with the sacred quill. The power to rewrite fate, now lost with the demon that unknowingly took it with her. And that's just the beginning, but you don't have to know anything else just yet. Telling the entire story in one go would be boring, wouldn't it? Everyone loves a good cliffhanger.